has everyone covered. Can your internet do that?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, presented by Xfinity. Today, we're on the road in Denver, Colorado, in Power Field and Mile High Stadium, where just in about an hour, the Eagles will take on the Denver Broncos. I'm Eagles beat reporter Josh Tolentino, and I'm joined by my Gameday Central co-host and fellow beat reporter EJ Smith. EJ, what's happening, man?
I'm doing pretty good, Josh. I'm a little mad. I haven't seen any mountains yet, but, maybe we'll take care of that after the game, maybe.
Hey, we definitely saw some mountains coming in, and actually yesterday I went on a 5-mile hike in the mountains with one of our photographers, Heather Khalifa, who's on the field right now taking snapshots of Fletcher Cox and Jalen Hurts down there. I see her. But man, all throughout the season, obviously, EJ, we're back. We're back at Gameday Central. We'll be coming to you, everyone back at home, all our readers, all our subscribers, before every Eagles game to tell you what you need to know about this team. You can join us at inquirer.com/GameDayCentral, where you'll be able to interact with us throughout the game. Today, it's myself, EJ Smith, Jeff McClain, and our columnist Mike Sealski come to you live from Denver.
Yeah, inquirer.com/GameDayCentral is also where you can send your questions and comments to us. It's one of our favorite segments every week is when we get to go through what you said. So make sure you send those in before next week so we can review those going into the Eagles Saints game that we'll talk about a little while away.
There's a lot of them to digest later, EJ. A lot of bold predictions from our readers, from our subscribers back home.
A lot of statements.
Yeah, not a lot of questions, a lot of statements. But, let's get into our statements. Let's get into it, man. What's the latest with this Eagles team? A lot has happened. As it does every week since this last loss against the Chargers last week at the Link. But what do you got on this team right now, EJ?
Yeah, I'd say that probably one of the biggest things that fans should know going into this game is that Jordan Howard was elevated from the practice squad to the active roster. I know you might say I've seen Jordan Howard on the field the last 2 weeks. How is he not on the active roster? It was a rule that was placed. The NFL put in place before last season because of COVID protocols, where you can elevate a player off the practice squad 2 games, but after that you have to bring them up to the active roster, which is what happened with Jordan Howard this week. We can talk about Howard later. I think he's had a really interesting story. But yeah, I would say that's the biggest story of the week. Other smaller things that you should keep in mind. Darius and Avonte Maddox both left Sunday's game against the Chargers early. They're both good to go for today. They were limited early in the week in practice, but they're full participants by the end, and they're good to go. They both said they'll play. And then another, important thing going into this game is that former Eagles offensive coordinator and interim head coach for one game, Pat Shurmur, he's the Broncos offensive coordinator now, won't be here today. He caught COVID earlier this week, so he won't be at the game, and he's their play caller. So they passed down play calling duties to quarterbacks coach Mike Shula. So I'd say those are the 3 big storylines.
EJ, I want to save our conversation on Jordan Howard for a little bit later when we discuss injuries. Let's move to Darius and Avonte Maddox. You mentioned them. Also, Rodney McLeod was limited earlier in the week. On Wednesday at practice, EJ, I kind of looked at you and we're at NovaCare Complex, and basically the entire starting secondary was not practicing. And at that moment, I thought it was concerning. They were not really limited at all moving forward Thursday and Friday. We saw them really go through all their motions, all their drills, all these different types of agility things, and they look fine. So I think, especially against Teddy Bridgewater, who's been playing well lately, I think they're going to need all of those guys, and most especially it's Jonathan Gannon in this defense. I want to throw a question at you, EJ. Teddy Bridgewater. We've been talking so much about 80% this season. A nod to the 5 quarterbacks who've completed more than 80% of their passes. Does Teddy Bridgewater join that club today?
Yeah, I feel like the Eagles defense is kind of like the Mendoza line or like the litmus test. Like if you're a good quarterback, you'll have a career day against them. And if you're not a good quarterback, you'll make them look, the defense will look competent for a game, let's call it. So I think Bridgewater is playing really well this season. I was actually really surprised when I looked at his advanced stats this week leading into the game. I think he's 3rd in EPA per play and 5th in completion percentage over expectation. That's big time stuff. He's played really efficiently. It seems like he's really comfortable in this offense, gets the ball out quick, but he can also also take shots down the field. When we were walking into the game, I saw a couple guys with T-shirts that said "Steady Teddy," and I think that's a good way to put it. Honestly, it's a good slogan. You better trademark that one. So no, I think he could have a really good game against this Eagles secondary. I don't think that health is really an issue with them. I think they're all good to go, but I think as we've seen all year, I think that they could. I think the Broncos offense could take advantage of this Eagles secondary.
Yeah, earlier in the week, Darius Slay, who previously played for the Lions, he saw Teddy Bridgewater a lot playing and competing in the NFC North, and it really felt like in that conversation that we had with Slay early in the week, just a lot of admiration for Teddy Bridgewater. And I know Slay had just, he spent probably about, what was that, EJ? At least 5 minutes just talking about where Teddy, all the ups and downs of Teddy's career. So, but I guess staying on that subject of Teddy Bridgewater, you mentioned Shermer. He's the offensive coordinator. He's the play caller. So, when you got to switch up, I guess, your game day, process, that can mess with you a little bit. It sounds like you're not foreseeing, that being a big issue here today with Mike Shula calling the plays, Don Shula's son.
Yeah, I feel like that's the type of thing where, like, if they have a terrible game offensively, then they'll probably go to the podium after the game and go, "Oh man, we really missed Pat today." But if they have a normal game, nobody's going to say much about it. I think it'll affect them. I'm sure. I think some play calls will be different. I think that they'll definitely miss having that presence. He's the offensive coordinator. You can't understate it. But I also think it's the type of thing that I don't really foresee it. I don't think it's the type of thing I would predict would have a huge impact on the game.
Yeah, and Mike Shula, he does have that experience, and obviously he's been the quarterbacks coach the past seasons here, and obviously working with Teddy throughout this season. So they've got that chemistry. It's like that Brian Johnson and his chemistry with Jalen Hurts that's been discussed a lot over the past week. But EJ, it's time to move on to who's hurt, who's healthy. We can continue the Jordan Howard conversation here. Miles Sanders, he's still on injured reserve, but this week he returned to practice. Not officially, but we saw him back on the field. Not necessarily participating in drills, but just being out there. And I think that's a good step, or, if you're an Eagles fan, to see him back on the field, because all of the past 2 weeks, we have not seen him on the field. Everything's been behind the scenes. He's been, staying inside the facility, not showing his face. The Eagles are comfortable enough to have him be out there at practice to observe, to, mention to Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, Kenny Gainwell, anything that he sees on the field. I think that was, an important step. But I guess if I were to ask you, EJ, what time, and I know you're not a doctor, but what time frame do you have on Miles Sanders coming back? Do you think he's close? But more importantly, how does his impending return, affect the backfield right now? And they've been running the ball a ton the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I think, the best we can do is read between the lines. When he first got hurt, Nick Sirianni said he was day-to-day. They were sort of hopeful he'd be able to play. And then it was like a last-second thing where it was like, all right, fine, we're going to put you on injured reserve. So I think that gives you the indication that it wasn't a serious injury, but they thought, okay, let's put you on the sideline for 3 weeks. Let you get completely healthy. So I do think that he's a guy to definitely keep an eye on after this game to see if he ends up getting activated off of IR. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Again, we saw him at practice. He seemed like he was in good spirits. We didn't see him move around much, but no, I definitely think that he's close. It would surprise me if he wasn't back in a game or two. So I would say that's the best I can give you. I'm not, like you said, I'm not a doctor. I haven't looked at his ankle. And then other than that, I think you mentioned the role that he might have when he comes back. I think he'll slot right back in as a featured running back. I do think that Jordan Howard has earned a role on this team. I think he's had a really weird career where, like, he was a Pro Bowl running back his rookie season. He rushed for 1,300 yards. I think he almost had 3 years where he rushed for more than 1,000 yards. I think the third year he was like 900 something. He came to the Eagles because the Bears, drafted David Montgomery, didn't really want him anymore. And then he immediately gets, to the Eagles with Miles Sanders, who the Eagles had just drafted Miles Sanders. He gets hurt. Miles Sanders kind of, emerges as the number one back. And then, you can tell us about the Miami experience. He just has had a bunch of bad breaks, but I think he's shown he can still run hard. He can still, be a productive running back in the NFL. He just sort of had, again, a tough couple years there.
Yeah, and you really walked us through the overview of his entire career. Just this season alone, EJ, he was inactive, or not necessarily inactive, but on the practice squad, which is even worse than being inactive the first 7 weeks. And, he said that he went through a lot of ups and downs during those first 2 months of the season, knowing at his age that he still wants to be able to produce in the NFL. But essentially being on the practice squad for 7 weeks. He gets an opportunity, and not only does he get an opportunity, EJ, he has three touchdowns the past two weeks. So good by the Eagles to promote him to the active roster. I'm just kind of concerned about his role moving forward, especially if Miles Sanders does come back. I'm not sure exactly, if we've seen Jordan Howard be the short yardage guy, that he can be a goal line guy. But I mean, if you have Miles Sanders there, if they still want to run out Boston Scott, I'm not sure how the touches will look when Miles Sanders gets back. And one guy we really haven't mentioned much, but I think Nick Sirianni is really high on, and I know he's had an up and down past 2 weeks in regards to his snap count, but someone I still think the coaching staff is very, very high on. And like when I mentioned, very high, I'm talking about like when you mentioned the playmakers on this team, I think he's up there. Kenny Gainwell, the rookie out of Memphis, I think they like a lot of his traits. So definitely a lot of interesting things there in that tailback room. By the way, EJ, I haven't heard you plug your Jamal Singleton story. A very good story, by the way.
Yeah,
the running back search for the
I gotta
Eagles.
do better work than that. You're right. I need to make sure I'm giving some shameless plugs here. So yeah, I wrote about Jamal Singleton this week. It was a Veterans Day piece. Singleton's second generation Air Force. He's kind of third generation military. I didn't get this in the story, so this is like a good insider tidbit for our Game Day Central viewers. His grandfather on his mom's side was in the British Army. So I don't know if there's like bad blood or anything. I'm just joking. I think it's all good. But no, so yeah, I wrote about his, he's an Air Force Academy graduate. And he really does. He credits the Air Force in general, the Academy and the service, really shaping his leadership style. We've seen him use a lot of like elaborate props, ball security drills. Like, you'll see him with like a punching bag attached to a stick or a football attached to a chain. He has a football that he fills with water. And those are things he's picked up through the military academies. So yeah, I definitely encourage you to check that story out. I really enjoyed my conversation with Jamal.
Yeah, if I were to point anything out to our readers, our subscribers, our viewers back home, is everyone sees the finished product on the field. They see the Miles Sanders, they see Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell, but there's a lot of moving pieces behind the scenes, and like what EJ mentioned, Jamal Singleton, a very good feature, again, by EJ in this week's Inquirer. Before we move on to what you said, EJ, a section we'd love to discuss, there was one more injury just to mention. Suffered in Friday's practice. You were there, EJ. Who got hurt?
So Andre Dillard, so we didn't see the injury. I just want to make sure I make that clear. But after practice, Nick Sirianni told us that Andre Dillard suffered a knee injury during the practice. So technically he was a full participant in the day, but he left early. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. This is the second time this season that an Eagles tackle has suffered a knee injury in practice. Jordan Mailata missed, I think it was 2 or 3 games with his knee injury that he suffered during practice, and he just got that brace off. It's funny, he kind of traded out his knee brace for an elbow brace. He has as dealing with an elbow thing. I wonder if they're like the same size almost sometimes, but yeah. So so Andre Dillard, I don't think the Eagles hope it doesn't come up today. Hopefully they won't need him. I think that they would enjoy having both of their tackles finish this game without Andre Dillard's, status being really relevant to the game. But it's still something to keep an eye on moving forward for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned Mailata. It's so easy to identify him. At the beginning of the season, I think there were 3 guys that it became so easy to identify on the field. We're hundreds of feet above. Again, coming to you, everyone live from Denver. Jordan Mailata, he's just such a massive human being, man. And again, like what you mentioned, hopefully for the Eagles' sake, that Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata are able to stay in there, and Andre Dillard's status does not affect anything at all throughout this game. But EJ, your favorite segment, not the tweet of the week just yet, but we're going to what you said. A lot of our readers and viewers back home, they send us comments throughout the week, and that's exactly what they were. They were comments, not many questions, but a lot of statements here. We're going to go to the first one from Mean Green Machine 21. The Eagles will win only one more game this season, and it's not this one. The Broncos will win 31-13 over Coach Flower Petals and the Eagles. A lot to digest there, EJ. At first, I don't think, we talk about win prediction, 8 games left. I 4-4, I think is maybe more realistic, before we discuss the second part of the comment.
Yeah, no, I have them at 7-10 at the beginning of the season. How they've gotten to this point in the year is a little bit different than what I expected, but honestly, all in all, this is about where I thought they'd be, and I still think that 7-10 is very attainable. Washington's currently up on Tampa Bay, so maybe I need to recalibrate how I feel about the Washington football team, but I really do. I think that those division games will all be winnable games for them. They have a game against the Jets coming up. And they could always surprise you. They got the Saints coming up with Trevor Siemian. I think that this team will have it's an easier stretch on the second half. I think that you could see them put together some wins and sort of finish the year on a better note than we're at right now, I would say.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if they go 500 on this back end of the schedule. You mentioned the opposition. I think most importantly, they got to take care of this game in Denver. But they come home next week, and you mentioned the Saints. Nick Sirianni does not have a home victory, EJ. I mean, we're 4 games in. He still does not. He's not won in Philadelphia. I think more about that is that that's a tough opposition. But it's just such an interesting stat that he's winless at home. And, as this commenter, Mean Green Machine, mentioned Coach Flower Petals, EJ, I mean, he's facing some adversity here. Not only is he winless at home last week, we saw that a fan at the Lincoln Financial field threw a bouquet of flowers. I don't know if you saw that live, EJ, or you saw the video, but, I don't want to discuss, whether fans are, they should be throwing things, but just more so on the adversity that Nick Sirianni is facing as a first-year head coach, about as expected.
Yeah, no, I think that you had to expect this was going to be an inexperienced coaching staff. It was sort of one of the questions going into the year was he didn't really have like a veteran former head coach on his staff. He didn't have someone, kind of like Jim Schwartz was for Doug Peterson. Somebody who had experience in that role. And he says he can lean on people outside the building, but I do think that the relative inexperience, I think, again, we had to expect some growing pains. I definitely don't condone fans throwing anything at anybody. I know that we get a reputation. Not we, sorry. I know that Philadelphia gets a reputation as like a tough town, with a lot of tough fans. But, I think that kind of stuff is always out of line.
Yeah, and really, Sirianni's had such an interesting year. He's a first-year play caller. He had a little bit of play calling experience, with Indianapolis. And when I say a little bit, maybe like 1-2 games worth. So I think that's something that we've learned here and have really tried to unravel, EJ, is that Nick Sirianni, he's still developing as a play caller. And a lot of that is the not only the run-pass ratio, but what he's calling. I think, we still see some screens, but it feels like the past, few weeks it hasn't been. It felt like, there are more screens at the beginning of the season than what we've seen lately. Let's move on to another question, EJ, or not question, another statement from Edward in New Jersey. I think the Eagles can win this game, but the defense has to put a hat on somebody. They made Derek Carr of the Raiders look like Joe Montana. And Edward from New Jersey, it wasn't just Derek Carr. I mean, Justin Herbert threw a career-high completion percentage earlier in the week. Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady all completed more than 80% of their passes. EJ, you mentioned at the top of the show, you think Teddy Bridgewater might eclipse that 80% mark. From the Eagles' perspective, what do they need to do to avoid that? Is it more so in the pass coverage game, or is it up front putting pressure on Teddy Bridgewater?
Yeah, no, I do. I think that, if there was a guy like, some of these guys that you mentioned, they're efficient quarterbacks, but Teddy is one of the most – he is one of the highest completion percentages in the league. I think he's third in the league in completion percentage. So this is a guy who, has been doing this against good defenses that take that type of stuff away. The Eagles will live with the underneath stuff. At least we've seen them do that so far. So I definitely think it'll be a real challenge for them. I think we're starting to see Jonathan Gannon mix things up, whether that's by, necessity or if that's something that, he feels maybe he's learning the strengths of his defense. I don't know if it's the type of thing where he's just trying to figure out what works at this point. But, we saw them use more 3-high coverage against the Chargers. We saw them more single high coverage. And that's a real departure from that constant 2-high safety look we saw them use for the first third of the season. So I think they're going to have to continue to mix it up. I don't know if blitzing Teddy Bridgewater is necessarily the best idea, but I think they'll probably end up trying it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that this Eagles defense, I think that they are who they are at this point. I think that people can be a little bit more down on them than they maybe should be. I think that a lot of their problems are amplified by really good quarterback play. But at the same time, there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in the league right now. You're going to have to figure out how to combat those guys. So, yeah, I don't know if this is the week they get right.
EJ, I think personnel-wise, we've learned as the season has progressed, they just don't have the proper personnel on the field to fit the scheme and the coverage plan right now. One we're going to get to the tweet of the week here in a little bit. But one thing I thought beneficial on Monday, as we reviewed the film, and you pointed out, there was a sequence last week when Derek Barnett was dropping into coverage to get into the flat. That's not what Derek Barnett is known for. Optics aside, everyone wants to talk about his penalties and everything. He's brought here to apply pressure to that pocket, to collapse the pocket, and to chase the quarterback. And I thought that just again, that sequence there where he's dropping into coverage, and that was the plan for that specific play. That's just not, if Jonathan Gannon wants to run that, he needs different personnel to be able to apply those types of systems and factors into his scheme.
Yeah, and it's not just that they dropped them into coverage because it's a sim pressure. They want to drop a defensive lineman into coverage so that they can rush a linebacker, and it's literally called a simulated pressure, to simulate pressure to the offensive line. They hope that they catch the offensive line making a mistake, but it's on the back end of that, it's you've got Derek Barnett dropping into the deep flat, and you don't have anybody around him. Derek Barnett, I could probably count on one hand how many coverage snaps Derek Barnett's had in his career to this season, before this season. So I agree. I think it's a personnel issue sometimes, but it's also a matter of knowing your personnel and knowing that if you're going to drop Derek Barnett into coverage, you better get home pretty quickly because he's not going to be able to cover anybody. So yeah, I definitely think that was a play that stood out. We've seen Josh Sweat playing a 4-eye or even almost a 3 technique. We've seen a lot of just guys playing in strange positions in this defense. And I get that creativity is important and, being multiple is important. But at the same time, sometimes you just need to put your guys in the best position, the positions that they play the best, and, hope that they can make enough plays for you to win a game,
Yep. I think that's exactly like what you said it. And I think that's something they're realizing is that they've got to adapt to their players' strengths. We saw Darius Slay throughout the season. He's been playing a little bit more man, a little bit more press, a lot different than what we saw earlier in the season where it was very zone heavy. You mentioned the 2 deep safeties and how they've even gotten away from that. And, it seemed like a big principle in Jonathan Gannon's defense. Still a lot to unpack here over these last 8 weeks is, you mentioned the defense is what it is, but now they focus to what can actually be our tweet of the week. EJ, let's pull it up. You every week you pick the tweet of the week. What was the tweet this week?
So yeah, this is a tweet highlighting that Howie Roseman was one of 5 GMs. So there were 38 scouts and executives at the Pitt, North Carolina game, but 5 GMs, and Howie Roseman was one of them. So this is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. Howie doesn't go to a lot of games. I was talking to my colleague Jeff McClain about this, and he sort of pointed out Howie isn't the one that does a lot of the scouting. You usually trust the scouts to go to games, but the fact that he wanted to
real quick, do you think he drove to the game from Pittsburgh?
I do not. I'd like to. Philly? As much as I'd like to think of him driving or the 4 hours, it's a beautiful drive this time of year. I'll put that out there. But yeah. No, I think he probably took a flight. But I think in the story I wrote this week where I did some draft preview stuff, another shameless plug, by the way, I think I said how he hits the turnpike or something like that, but I don't think it's true.
But he was obviously there to scout Kenny Pickett, to see what the deal was, and not just that, interact with the other GMs because, obviously the Eagles have these 3 picks. It looks like it's going to be 3 first-round picks. Bump some shoulders in the press box or wherever they were seating. I mean, with those other GMs and scouts.
Yeah, the other GMs were all most of them are with teams that don't have an answer quarterback in the next, in the short term or long term future. And I just think it tells you again. I think Howie knew that this was going to become a story. When you go to a college game, you're in the press box. Your name, it is public information. So he knew this was going to come out there. And I think that it's just important to, take note of something like this. While Jalen Hurts has had ups and downs, he's shown some promise in times, has missed some throws here and there. It's still important to know the Eagles are doing their due diligence on this quarterback class. I think that they're, it's a safe assumption to think that they will be in on veteran quarterbacks that may be available this offseason. So again, it's just, the actions speak louder than words here. It's he's going to see Kenny Pickett. That's kind of a message on where they are at with Jalen Hurts right now.
Yeah, and it's as they possess the Dolphins pick, which I think is the number 3. The Dolphins won this week, so I think it drops to the 3 to 5 range. Mm-hmm. But when you have that pick, I mean, you mentioned due diligence. They have to. I mean, it's just what the culture of the NFL is. I mean, if you've got that high of a pick, you've got to go scout the guy. It doesn't matter, regardless of your the state of your quarterback or really any position. But EJ, I'm going to go on the record here And the Eagles have these 3 picks. I don't think once draft day comes next April, I don't think they're gonna have all 3. I think they're gonna make some moves. Would you ride with me on that, or are you gonna say they're gonna have all 3?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think that what those picks afford you is flexibility more than anything. And, if let's say that Jalen Hurts plays the way that he's played the rest of this season, I mean, I think it would make total sense to say the quarterback class is coming out. It's not solid. There's no sure bets the way that there was. Although nobody's sure bet. There's no elite prospects the way that there were last year. Maybe it's we punt on this quarterback class. We stockpile picks moving forward. Instead of using all 3 of these picks on different position players, maybe we trade back and get another first rounder in that situation. And they might say that. So I think that the flexibility that it affords you is, it's you can't really understate it. And I mean, we know that Howie's always on the phones trying to make trades. So I definitely think that those 3 picks will be fluid for sure. I don't think it's just going to be as simple as stand pat and make 3 picks. Because, I mean, at the same time, it's like, do you really want 3 rookies on the field for you next year? Like, do you really want to be counting on 3 first-round rookies? I mean, I don't know. A lot of teams probably wouldn't want to put 3 rookies on the field that quickly. So
fans can criticize Howie Roseman for how he's drafted over the past years, but I mean, I think we've seen in recent years he stockpiles for the future and draft capital, and this past offseason was an excellent example where they knew they wanted Avonte Smith. They thought they could be flexible and trading with the Dolphins and swapping picks moving backwards, and they still got their guy. The Dolphins still got their guy in Jalen Waddle. The Eagles still got their guy in Devontae Smith, and not only that, the Eagles possess the Dolphins pick, which again has continued to look like gold as the season has progressed. But
that
EJ, it's almost
very well.
It really has. EJ, it's almost time to wrap up, but it's prediction time. And Sunday's Philadelphia Inquirer, which readers can go see in the paper and online right now. It was a clean sweep between myself, EJ, and Jeff McClain. We went with the Broncos. EJ, are you sticking with that pick?
Oh yeah, I'm sticking with it. I think the Eagles' offense will probably continue to be a run-heavy, offense that looks productive at times, but I think it's also fair to point out they were really dominant in the first half against the Chargers, and they scored 10 points in that half, 24 points in the game. So I don't know if this is I've said it so many times this season. I don't know if the Eagles offense can keep up in a shootout, and I don't know if the defense can keep this from becoming a shootout. It's really I guess I can keep this brief. That's really all that there is to it for me. I mean, so yeah, I think I picked the Broncos by a touchdown or 2, and that's definitely what I'm sticking with. I think my opinion has not changed.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my pick as well. I'm sticking with the Broncos. But one thing I want to point out is that last week against the Chargers, and I know Jalen Hurts, a lot of his stats throughout the season have been padded in garbage time. But I wouldn't necessarily call last week garbage time. I mean, this was still a winnable game against the Chargers. They were in there until the end, and Jalen he directed I can't remember the exact yardage on that final drive. The offense ended up not getting the ball back because the defense couldn't get a stop. But Jalen Hurts showed a lot of maturity on that drive, and he hit. He made a lot of tough passes there, basically in 2-minute mode. And I think there's some transition. I'm predicting a little bit of transition, but it falls on the defense. And again, there's just been so much uncertainty, so much, inconsistency with this team. We talked about the scheme and the personnel earlier. I just think that, again, Jonathan Gannon is learning a lot in his first year as defensive coordinator, and I'm taking Teddy Bridgewater and the Broncos today.
Teddy.
Are you going to get one of those shirts on the way out of here?
I don't know if I'm getting one of the shirts, but I got to admit, I did have an appreciation for the Steady Teddy slogan. That's a good one.
Yeah, but EJ, the Eagles, they're coming out. It looks like they're about to break their huddle on the field. Again, we're coming to you live from Denver, Mile High Stadium. It's time to wrap up. I want to say thank you to all our listeners and subscribers back home for tuning in to Inquire Live at Gameday Central, presented by Xfinity. Be sure to stick around, though, at inquire.com/Gameday Central. Again, you'll be able to chat with myself, EJ Smith, Jeff McClain, and our columnist here on site, Mike Sealski. You'll be able to chat with us throughout the game, ask questions, and really interact as this game develops.
Yeah, and we'll be back next Sunday from Xfinity Live outside the Link when the Eagles take on the New Orleans Saints. Another big game. Malcolm Jenkins returns to the Link. I'm getting ahead of myself already. I'm just so excited, I guess. Yeah, right.
EJ, you gotta stick with Nick Sirianni 1% every day.
1% every day. Just
got a game to cover here up in Denver.
Yeah, but don't forget to watch us then. We'll be on at 11:30 at inquirer.com/Gameday Central. Until then, we look forward to hearing what you have to say and continuing the conversation every week at Inquire Live at Gameday Central, presented by Xfinity. See you next week.